Hey guys, what's up? Happy New Year. Hope you guys had a good 2016. And as we look forward to the new year in music, I want to reflect back on 2016 for a minute and go over my top 10 favorite albums of 2016. So let's get started. Now, I do have one honorable mention that didn't quite make the list, and that is Misadventures by Prevail. This CD, I'm not sure if it just didn't live up to its hype because of the fact that the wait was so long for a new Prevail album, and I was expecting it to be spectacular, or if it was just because of the fact that it wasn't all that great of an album. The release date for Misadventures was May 13th, has 11 tracks on it, has 3 singles, The Divine Zero, which was released in 2015 actually, then Texas is Forever and Circles were both released in 2016, those are the 3 singles. And it also debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 when it was released. It was a decent album, but I don't think it really had the kick and the flair that Collide with the Sky and Selfish Machines had. I felt like each of those last 2 albums had like a distinct sound that they were, I don't want to say going towards, but just kind of had. With Misadventures, I just thought it was a little generic, a little typical, even a little bit boring at times. Don't get me wrong, there's some good tracks off the album. Personally, my favorite is Phantom Power and Ludicrous Speed, but it just didn't really catch my attention that much. There were a limited number of breakdowns and solos throughout the album, and typically with an album you want to have at least one of those, either breakdowns or solos, throughout the album. There were a couple solos and breakdowns, like in Phantom Power. There was actually kind of like a mix of both. In Texas Forever, it had a little bit of a breakdown, but I don't really think there was much excitement to go on in terms of guitar work on this album. Overall, I want to give it a rating of 6 out of 10. I really hope that their next album takes a little step up. I think Collide with the Sky is still their best album to date so far, and I hope they can top that with their next album. Alright, so let's get started with the actual list now. Coming in at number 10, the Amity Affliction, This Could Be Heartbreak.
The truth is that I'm all fucked up like you. Yeah, we're all fucked up, it's true.
This album was released on August 12th, which is actually 2 days before my birthday. Has 11 tracks, same as Misadventures. Another 3 singles. We got I Bring the Weather With Me, This Could Be Heartbreak, and All Fucked Up. And it debuted at number 26 on the Billboard 200 and hit number 1 in Australia, which is where the Amity Affliction are from. Overall, I think this is a good album. It's a good follow-up to Let the Ocean Take Me, but I don't think it hits the same level or plane that Let the Ocean Take Me was on. I think there's a similar structure in some songs, but very different structure in other songs. One new thing that we witnessed in This Could Be Heartbreak is that Joe Birch, the unclean vocalist of the Amity Affliction, seemed to do a little bit more of a raspy singing type voice in some songs, like on This Could Be Heartbreak in the first verse. You can definitely hear it there. And it's a nice touch, I will admit that. I think he does it pretty well, and I'd like to see more of that in the future if Amity's good with going along with that. The Amity Affliction have actually confirmed that this is going to be their last album centered around depression and anxiety, and that might be a good thing, because when you have the same concept for multiple albums, not only does it get kind of stale, but you don't have as much to write about, so you're kind of dragging the whole concept out. So their next album is going to be definitely different in terms of what they're writing about, and I'm looking forward to that. One song I want to dedicate my focus to real quick is All Fucked Up, my favorite song off the album. It's a really nice break, like a slow song in the middle of all the heavy stuff. Once again, the Amity Affliction don't disappoint with the fantastic lyricism, and this song really demonstrates that. And there's also an acoustic and clean version called All Messed Up, which kind of takes away from the emotional vibe that you get from the song, but it's still a really solid piece of acoustic work. There's also a voice message at the end of a song on the album called OMG IMY, which is Oh My God I Miss You. And I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a almost like a sequel to the voice message at the end of Never Alone on Let the Ocean Take Me. So it was cool how they kind of continued that, and I'm not sure if they will do that with the next album with the theme changing, but if they do go into the next album and continue this voice message at the end of one of their songs, it'll be interesting to see how that's gonna carry on and continue. Overall, I want to give this album a rating of a 7 out of 10. Number 9 on the list, Retrograde by Crown the Empire.
Do you know who I am? I'm so afraid you'll never understand. There's a part of me so lost out there, and I just wanna know, yeah, I just wanna know, am I becoming a hologram?
So Retrograde was released in the middle of the summer, during the midst of Van's Warped Tour, which Crown the Empire played. It was released on July 22nd. The album consists of 11 tracks, as did the previous 2 albums on this list, but there are actually also 2 bonus tracks on the Target exclusive edition of this album, which are 4 Days and Mercury, and that's 4 days as in not the number 4, like the word for, F-O-R. There were also 3 singles released off this album: Zero, Weight of the World, and Hologram. In regards to its debut position on the Billboard, it debuted at number 15 on the Billboard 200. Overall, I think Retrograde is definitely a step down from Crown the Empire's previously released material. Although it wasn't as good as their previous albums, it was still a solid rock album with some metal influences in it. It was more radio rock than metal for most of this album. It was a lack of heavy songs, and that's kind of one of the main things I look for, me personally. But like I said, it wasn't a bad album. It just kind of lacked luster. Crown the Empire actually expressed in a tweet on their main account that they, quote, couldn't believe that they used to do breakdowns, which kind of is a little kick in the balls or the punch in the stomach to all the fans of their older material that are still like fans of the band, and now it's kind of like not giving them hope that they will be doing any heavier stuff in the future. Ultimately though, Crown the Empire are the ones creating the material, so they should have the say in what their music is going to be for the future, not the fans. One of the most disappointing things about this album is that it's possibly the last album with their vocalist, Dave Escamilla. I honestly don't know how to pronounce his last name. I want to say it's Escamilla, but I'm not sure. But anyway, Dave currently has a blurred future with the band. He missed the last tour, the Retrograde tour, to focus on some personal issues, and he hasn't really released a statement at all. After that, the only thing that he's been saying is that he's doing good, and all the fans are going to understand soon. Just by the way he's saying that, it kind of gives me the vibe that he may not be back with Crown the Empire, and I really hope that isn't the case, but we'll have to see what happens in the near future. My favorite songs off this album are Hologram and Are You Coming With Me. Hologram actually happens to be one of my favorite songs released this entire year. Technically last year, because now I'm recording this in 2017. But definitely in my top 5 for best songs released in 2016. Overall, I give the album a 7.2 out of 10. Ranking at number 8 on the list, Aggressive by Beartooth. Aggressive was released on June 3rd, and it consisted of 12 tracks, with 4 singles being Aggressive, Always Dead, Loser, and Hated, and it debuted at number 25 on the Billboard 200. I think this album is a really solid follow-up album to Disgusting. I think they're about on the same plateau in terms of how good they are, I guess. I think the themes are slightly typical to what they've produced in the past. Like I said, the Amity Affliction, if they keep up with this, it could get dragged out. But there's a very obvious punk influence, and there's no real weak songs in the track list either. I think each song is really solid, and there's not one that kind of is like kind of like a pushover. It was even kind of hard to pick one song that I liked more than all the others because they were so close in terms of how well they were written and produced. But I think I would have to go with Hated, which I believe is a theme song to something having to do with the WWE, so that's kind of cool that they're getting recognition from a major sport. Overall, I'm going to give this album a 7.4 out of 10. Coming in at number 7 on the list, Bad Vibrations by A Day to Remember.
Everybody sees your head so low. You ask me why to know us. Stop me the one, open your spark. I'll be the light and through the darkness. Everybody sees your head so low. You ask me why to know us.
Bad Vibrations was released on September 2nd after being delayed, I believe, like a week. I'm not sure why. There wasn't really a reasoning to that. But 11 tracks were on the album. There were 2 bonus tracks on the deluxe edition of the album. There are 5 singles that actually got released off this album, which are Paranoia, Bad Vibrations, Bullfight, Naivety, and We Got This. And it debuted just missing the #1 spot, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The album title is derived from feelings of stress and anxiety, and in my opinion, I think it's A Day to Remember's best album since Homesick. After Common Courtesy, A Day to Remember kind of went soft. People were a little bit upset with it, but their heavy metalcore roots are back in full force for this album, with the heavier songs like Bad Vibrations and Expose. There are definitely some metalcore roots showing in this album. Each song in this album winds up having a different meaning to it, and if you actually go online, there's a little bit of an article on what each song is about. So that was kind of interesting how each song has like a little story to it. The one thing I don't like about this album is that it's really top heavy, with the best songs being at the top and the weaker songs being towards the bottom. But the bottom songs on the bottom of the track list aren't that bad either. So the album as a whole was definitely a good album. My 2 favorite songs off this album are Bullfight and Exposed, and overall I'm going to give it a rating of 7.9 out of 10. Clocking in at number 6 on the list is an album that comes from a band that has never released a full-length album before, Lifelines by I Prevail.
Stuck in your head. Stuck in your head. For the record, you're the broken one. Tried to sing along, but we got stuck.
Lifelines was released on October 21st and consists of 13 tracks, and there's also a hidden track which I haven't heard called I Prevail. So I'm gonna definitely dig up on that and try to find that and see what it sounds like. There are 3 singles off this album, which are Scars, Stuck in Your Head, and Come and Get It. All really solid songs. And this album, that was their first full-length album of any kind, has a really impressive debut number on the Billboard. It debuted at number 15 on the Billboard 200. And that might be because they got some recognition on Punk Goes Pop when they did their cover of Blank Space by Taylor Swift. But either way, number 15 on a first full-length album for a band in this genre, that's really impressive. One of the things I admire most about this album is the fact that there's a really diverse mood changes throughout the album, and there's a good balance of heavy and soft songs. You have the heavy songs like Come and Get It and Scars, and the bottom of the track list there's some softer stuff, so it's kind of cool to see that a band like I Prevail can change the tone or vibe that they give off throughout the album. We'll have to see how they pan out in the future, but I personally believe that I Prevail could turn out to be one of the biggest bands in the metalcore genre. Overall, I give this album a solid 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 5 on the list, Dark Matter by The Word Alive. This was one of the earlier released albums of 2016. It was released on March 18th, consisted of 12 tracks and 3 singles, which are Trapped, Sell Out, and Made This Way. It debuted at number 74 on the Billboard 200, which really surprised me, honestly, because for such a solid album, I thought this would be higher up. Also, their previous album, Real, debuted at number 33 on the charts, so I'm not sure why there's such a big difference in a drop for that matter. Maybe it was because of the music that was released around the time that Dark Matter was released, but either way, it kind of perplexes me as to why it was so low on the Billboard charts. The lead single to this album, which was released in January of 2016, Trapped, is without a doubt my favorite song released in all of 2016. I love the guitar work, the bass work in it, everything about Trapped I love. One thing about Trapped is that it also contains possibly my favorite breakdown of all time. It kind of goes from the chorus to a slow bridge part and then just punches you in the face with a breakdown, and it's heavy. It's really fun to play on bass. I might be doing a cover of it in the future, but we'll have to see. But definitely one of my favorite breakdowns of all time. Speaking of bass, there were also insane bass lines just throughout this entire album, and not only in Trapped, but in songs like Sell Out and Grunge. There's some really solid bass work. While the singles on the album were all incredible, and some of the other tracks in the album were just as good, there were a few tracks that just didn't meet my expectations, which is why this album is only at number 5 on the list. Overall, I'm going to give this album a rating of 8.2 out of 10. So the album coming in at number 4 on this list is one that I don't have a physical copy of, just because I recently got into this band and this album within the past couple weeks, but it's so good that I had to put it in the top 5. And that album is Bad Omens' self-titled album, Bad Omens.
I had you in my grip, but you're starting to slip. Bring out the worst in me. And now it's come to end. I think I'm giving in. You set my demons free.
This album was released on August 19th, consists of 12 tracks, and has 3 singles, The Worst in Me, Glass Houses, and Exit Wounds. And there was no Billboard 200 charting, which I'm not really surprised by, considering this is their first album and not a lot of people have heard of Bad Omens. But trust me, you will be hearing from them soon, because they are on the bubble of just bursting into this huge metalcore band, mainly because they sound like the reincarnation of the metalcore Bring Me the Horizon. As Bring Me the Horizon have kind of moved into a more arena rock and hard rock type of genre, Bad Omens have jumped into their spot to replace them. This album is kind of a mix of Bring Me the Horizon's 2 albums, Sempiternal and There's a Hell. Believe me, I've seen it. There's a Heaven, let's keep it a secret. Trust me, that's a tongue twister. Don't try that at home. It was hard to even say that, but it's kind of got these more modern metalcore guitar riffs too, so it's kind of like a refreshing take on Bring Me the Horizon. This album gives you a big heaping of heavy music with just enough slower and atmospheric material, such as Enough Now, and Crawl. Those are the 2 slowest, I'd say, tracks on the album. And the vocalist Noah Sebastian sounds like Ollie Sykes, but if his voice were 100% healthy, which we all know that Ollie Sykes' voice is not healthy whatsoever. But like I said, these guys are on the brink of blowing up into a huge band, so definitely keep your eye on them in the near future. My 2 favorite songs off this album are The Worst in Me, the lead track, and Malice. Overall, I'm going to give this album a rating of 8.3 out of 10. Coming in at number 3 on the list, we go pop punk for this one, California by Blink-182.
I'm not coming. Save your breath, I'm nearly bored to death and fading fast. Life is too short to last. Back on earth, I'm broken, lost and cold and fading fast. Life is too short to last long.
California was released on the 1st of July and consisted of 16 tracks, and there's actually a bonus track called Hey, I'm Sorry on the Japanese edition. I haven't heard that yet, but I'll look into it. There were 2 singles released off this album, which is kind of surprising for an album that had 16 tracks. Those 2 singles are Bored to Death and She's Out of Her Mind, and it debuted at the top spot on the Billboard 200. It got number 1 on its first week. This is Blink-182's first album since 2011 when they released Neighborhoods. It is also their first album with their new guitarist/vocalist Matt Skiba. Album writing for California was actually supposed to begin in 2014, but the former guitarist and vocalist of Blink-182, Tom DeLonge, who's been around since the start of Blink-182, delayed the process multiple times by not showing up for recordings and delivering confirmations through emails and having his agent send Blink the rest of Blink's stuff. So what happened was in August of 2015, after a legal separation of Tom DeLonge and an official addition of Matt Skiba as Blink's new member, they started working on California and managed to release it in 2016 on July 1st. According to Travis Barker, there is currently a deluxe edition of California in progress right now, and he says that there's enough new songs on the deluxe edition to be considered a standalone album. So that's kind of exciting that we're basically going to be getting another Blink album within the next, I'm guessing, year. My two favorite songs off this album, neither of them are actually singles. They're Los Angeles and Cynical. Cynical being the lead track to the album, which is only about a minute 50 seconds long, but it packs a punch and it gets you ready going for the rest of the album. Overall, I give this album a rating of 8.5 out of 10. The album coming in at number 2 comes from the rapcore kings themselves, Chaos by Attila. This album was released only 2 months ago. It was released on November 4th, consists of 11 tracks, and it has 3 singles, Public Apology, Ignite, and Bulletproof, and it debuted at number 30 on the Billboard 200. As expected from Attila, the lyrical content is very subpar, but the whole album musically is heavy as fuck, and it's awesome, honestly. I can't wait to see them play a lot of these new songs at concerts in the future. Hopefully I get to go see them in March when they come to New York City, but I'm not sure if I'm going to that yet, so fingers crossed. There's a lot of heavy breakdowns as expected, catchy choruses, and a lot of impressive rapping in the verses of songs, such as in the middle of Ignite and Mosh Pit. Chris Frunzak actually does a lot of new stuff vocally on this album to go along with the more impressive rapping that he recorded on this album, but he's also done this more raspy singing thing, as I pointed out, that Joel Birch did with the Amity Affliction, but it kind of works, honestly. And because of that new vocal style, they've also kind of taken a new metal approach on certain songs like Bulletproof and Public Apology, and I think it definitely paid off. It's a little bit different than what you typically hear from a new metal artist, but it's a new take on new metal, and I think it's cool. One guy I want to give props to is the guitarist Chris Link, because just throughout this entire album, it's filled with killer breakdowns and killer guitar solos, and they're impressive as fuck. And I really hope to hear more of that in the future. For Chaos, I'm going to give it a rating of 8.8 out of 10. And the number 1 album of 2016, in my opinion, my friend Nick is going to kill me for this, Headspace by Issues.
Everybody needs loving sometimes. Physical emotion, alright, babe.
So Headspace was released on May 20th, has 13 tracks, and only 2 singles were released off the album, which are The Realist and COMA. They actually started playing a song called Blue Wall, one of my favorite songs off the album, before either of those 2 tracks were released at concerts. And I saw them perform it, I believe it was, I want to say March, and I saw them play on the Outbreak tour with Crown the Empire, and it was heavy, and that's what got my hopes up for this album, but it turned out to be much more than just a heavy album. This album is one of the most musically diverse metal albums to be released in years. The Issues infuses gent, progressive metal with elements of R&B, funk, jazz, country, pop, and rap, and it's just this really cultural album almost, where they mix all these different genres in, and honestly I feel like it's an album that anyone could like any song off of, because there's so much diversity, and it's incredible honestly what they were able to do with it. Skylar Accord, the bassist, played some absolutely ridiculous bass lines on this album, such as in COMA and The Realist, and each song is unique in its own way, both lyrically and musically. This album just completely changes the game in metal music as a whole, and Issues took a huge ballsy step by infusing all these genres into metal music, and it panned out perfectly. this record is genre defining. My favorite songs off the album are Flojo, COMA, and Blue Wall, and I'm going to give this a rating of 9.5 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and drop your top 10 albums of 2016 down in the comments below, or some of your favorite albums. But hopefully this year in 2017 we get just as good of a group of albums and new material as we did in 2016, because 2016 absolutely killed it. We have a lot of new music to look forward to in 2017, and until then, peace out.